The Edmonton Oilers took care of business and are moving on to round two.
You are Locked On Oilers, your daily podcast on the Edmonton Oilers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's edition of Locked On Oilers. I am your host, Nick Sararis. The Oilers took care of business, moved on to round two. We're going to talk all about it, but first, game off. We got to talk more about Monopoly Go. This fast-paced game lets you team up with friends for tournaments to unlock awesome prizes like unique stickers for trading, cool playing pieces, and hilarious emojis for taunting your friends. So download Monopoly Go now. It is free on Google Play or the Apple App Store. Game on. So today, very straightforward. We're going to talk about game number 5. The Oilers wrapping up, taking care of business. The Kings, 5 games. One of a handful of series to be wrapped up in only 5 games, which I think lends a lot of credence to what I've spent most of the regular season saying, that there isn't a whole lot of parity, that the middle of the pack is everybody beating up on each other and not a wide swath of teams that really could compete for a Stanley Cup. Segment number 2, we're going to talk a little bit about what this means for the Oilers, both in relation to the rest of the playoffs this season, what it means for the bigger picture, some of the storylines behind the scenes that don't necessarily matter as far as on the ice, but trickle up from the ice. And then we're going to wrap up looking ahead, talk a little bit about Nashville, Vancouver, whoever the Oilers will be playing in round number 2. So starting off straightforward, the storyline coming out of this game is going to be the officiating. I make no bones about it. I don't BS. I'm not going to give you any spin. There was a lot of penalties called in the game tonight. There were a lot of penalties called. I'm pulling it up as we talk now. The Oilers got 5 power plays. Do I think there was a 5-1 penalty disparity in this game where the Kings only got 1 power play opportunity? The Kings went the entire playoff series, these 5 games, without scoring a single goal on the power play. If you listen to yesterday's episode with Eddie Garcia, we highlighted that if the Kings were going to find a way to win this game, it was likely going to have to come on the man advantage just to simply get a bounce. And yes, the Kings did end up getting a ridiculous bounce in this game. That puck that bounces off the end wall where Skinner was out of the net. It happens. That's a stupid play. You never want to see it happen. Anytime the goalie leaves their net mouth, leaves the crease, it puts the fear in God and all of us hockey fans. So the fact the Oilers got burned on a stupid goal, that wasn't really anyone's fault. You know, that's one of those freak fluke bounces. That's not something you're really going to have a coaching point on as a coach to your goalie. That it sucks. It happens. But the Oilers resoundingly responded to the situation. I felt at 5-on-5, like I have felt for most of this series, the Kings have done a reasonable enough job. If you go look at the underlying numbers for the series, I know Natural Stat Trick hasn't updated yet, but the Kings won a lot of this game at 5-on-5. If you go look at the underlying numbers, the Oilers were outscoring chance, they were out expected goals, and the only area where they did outplay the Kings at 5-on-5 was the high danger looks, which you would expect from an Oilers team that features so much star power when you have the ability of a McDavid, of a Draisaitl, of a Hyman, of a Bouchard to make you set up other players to create offense. It's going to inherently lead to more dangerous chances. Of course, there's always an element that teams that are picky in their shot selection, they're going to have fewer scoring chances, and that generally corresponds with higher quality chances, because if you're not settling for a bad shot, you're working to get the puck to a more dangerous area. And the Oilers were not great at 5-on-5 in this series. They were thoroughly outplayed in Game 4 when they won 1-0. I would argue they played reasonably well tonight, but the Oilers haven't even begun to scratch the surface of how good they can be if they get everything going all at once. I thought Stuart Skinner did a really nice job of bouncing back after a rough first few games. And yeah, the Oilers weren't in a position like some of the other teams in these playoffs, like the Kings, like the Islanders, like the Bruins, like the Leafs, to go to their backup goalie by choice. Now, Vancouver's different where they are down to their third string goalie, and I understand a lot of people are going to give them a pass at playing Seelovs, whose name I had to look up the phonetic pronunciation of because I wanted to make sure I said it right. But the Oilers were not in a position where they could have gone to Jack Campbell or Calvin Pickard. They couldn't do it. They were not in a position where that was a viable option for them. So Skinner answering the bell the way he did in this series, it doesn't necessarily mean he's going to be great the rest of the playoffs, but it does show he has the ability to occasionally play at a really high level. And for my money in today's NHL, you don't need one of the 5 best goalies in the world to win the Stanley Cup. Does it help? Yes, of course. Anytime you can have an advantage anywhere on the ice, it matters. But more realistic and more honestly, you need a goalie who can play like one of those guys. You don't necessarily need one. You look back at recent NHL history. We talk about Adin Hill last year. Really nice season. He's probably going to end up being Canada's goalie at international competitions next year, which is kind of crazy. Against Adin Hill against Florida. Bob had a really nice playoffs, but had a really weak regular season. Bob had a nice regular season this year, so a little bit different context. Bob's hard to get a feel for. Tampa, Colorado. Darcy Kemper had a nice playoffs, but Darcy Kemper's not a top 10 goalie in the league. He did just enough. Against Tampa, Vasilevsky, definitely one of the 5 best. Then you have the 2 back-to-back Tampa years. Vasilevsky, one of the 5 best during that period of time. The Blues, Binnington, a lot closer to Stuart Skinner than he is, say, Vasilevsky. 2018, Braden Holtby. Braden Holtby was right there on the edges. I don't know if Braden Holtby was ever a top 5 goalie in the world, but he was definitely top 10, so that's fair. Matt Murray, come on. Matt Murray had a nice playoff run. It's great. Marc-Andre Fleury, great. Neither of those guys was top 10 in the world at that point. You go before that. Corey Crawford is somebody who I've argued with a lot. I've argued about a lot on the internet that I was never particularly impressed with his game or never particularly felt like he was that important to the Blackhawks dynasty. If you want to argue Corey Crawford was top 10, sure. But talking about the Oilers, their playoff run this year, I think the 2 main takeaways, number one, the special teams matter. And I know that sounds silly. Of course, special teams matter, but the domination on special teams is what won the Oilers this series. The Kings did not score a single goal at 5 on 4 or 4 on 5. They didn't get a shorty. They didn't get a power play goal. And that was the difference in the series. The Kings outscored the Oilers in this series at 5 on 5, 12-11. And then Edmonton outscored them 9-0 on special teams. The goal differential for the series, 20-12. That is not something you're going to be able to overcome. A 9-0 deficit on special teams is insurmountable. And no, and I said this with Eddie Garcia when we did our crossover episode yesterday. The Oilers aren't this good on the penalty kill, and the Kings' power play is not this bad. If anything, you would have expected the Kings' power play to be able to make some things happen because of the volatility of some of the players on the Oilers' penalty kill, like Darnell Nurse, like Vinny Desharnais, those type of guys. While they had their moments, and I thought Desharnais was particularly good on the penalty kill the other night, I never really felt that the Kings did enough on their power play. And some of that is just a redundancy thing. They have a lot of guys who play a similar way, and that's not always a bad thing, but it does make it more difficult to create meaningful offense. But coming up next, we're going to talk a little bit more about the bigger picture, the storylines, and the talking points that you're going to hear across both Canada and the States over the next few days as we wait for round 2. Coming up next on Locked On Oilers, where we've got your team covered every day. All right, game off. We got to pause here to talk more about Monopoly Go. I know what you're saying. Delay of game. You already talked about that. But there's so much good stuff in this game. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with friends for time tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock. And there's so much to get. Unique stickers you can trade with friends to complete albums for big prizes. Cool new playing pieces to travel the boards with. Hilarious emojis for taunting friends when you smash their buildings or heist their vault. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton include their own unique mini games like digging for treasure or a robot pachinko machine, and there's always new timed events that help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go. Get off the bench and go download it now. It is free on Google Play or the Apple App Store. Game on. I want to thank everybody who's made it through 2 whole weeks of me hosting Locked On Oilers. We haven't gotten in trouble yet. We haven't gotten the kibosh. And most importantly, the Oilers won their playoff series and we're going to keep going on and the playoff beard's going to continue. Yes, the playoff beard is going to continue as long as the Oilers, or if you're watching on YouTube, yes, if my Rangers keep going, the playoff beard stays. But this has to feel particularly satisfying for the Oilers. And I say that not just because they advanced relatively cleanly, no shenanigans, no lingering controversies of any kind holding a black cloud over the team as they advance. There was a real expectation for the Oilers coming into both this season and coming into the playoffs that they would be one of the teams that's a serious contender for the Stanley Cup. Okay. Not just a playoff team, not just win a round or two. The expectations in Edmonton were to compete for a Stanley Cup. They came out of the gate about as rough as you can. And yeah, McDavid injured out of the gate, got off to kind of a slow start for him, still finished with 100 assists. You've heard me cite the stat probably at least 10 times in the 2 weeks I've been doing the show now. The Oilers had the best record in the league once they hired Chris Knobloch to be their head coach. There was a discernible flip of the switch in terms of energy and feel. Now, I don't think Jay Woodcroft is a bad coach. Frankly, I think there are a lot of teams right now in need of a coach like Seattle. Frankly, I would have said like Buffalo, but they hired Lindy Ruff for some reason. I could see the Devils. There are a lot of teams right now. I could see where Jay Woodcroft could go and instantly have some success. I think changing the coach the way the Oilers did when they did, that was a wake-up call. That wasn't saying, hey, we don't think Jay Woodcroft can do this anymore. This is, you guys need a kick in the butt. You need a new voice. This will inspire you. This will help you get going. The new coach bump is real. Go look when guys take over in season. You always get one of those nice little winning streaks. The Islanders did it too. The Islanders did it twice where they rattled off a 7 and then an 8-game winning streak down the back half of the season under Patrick Waugh to salvage their season, make the playoffs before getting eliminated in 5 games from Carolina. I think almost assuredly Chris Knobloch's going to sign himself a multi-year extension to stay in Edmonton, especially being the first round series when it's smooth as it did. I think this can quell some of the concerns about what Draisaitl's intentions are this summer and McDavid's down the road. I think as long as those contracts are not long-term, those will always be stories. Now, I'm not saying that Draisaitl or McDavid are going anywhere. I don't think they are. I think the Oilers are going to move heaven and earth to facilitate keeping those guys, doing whatever they can to make them happy, whatever that looks like, if that's personnel where they want to keep or get rid of certain guys on the team, if there's certain coaches, assistants, if they want more stuff off the ice infrastructure-wise, like a new practice rink or something, strength and conditioning stuff or training or nutrition. If the Oilers can find anything to help them keep these guys, they're going to do it. I think you are going to continue to hear conjecture about both McDavid and Draisaitl because hockey media is bored. Hockey media needs these storylines to grab onto. Well, is McDavid going to go somewhere? Is he going to go back to Ontario? Is he going to go down to the States or the Rangers or is Vegas or Florida? Maybe he wants to go somewhere where there's no state tax. Maybe he'll go to the Stars. All of that stuff is mind-numbingly stupid and used to fill empty airtime. Why is Connor McDavid going to leave Edmonton? Why? Why is Leon Draisaitl going to leave Edmonton? Those two guys have such an innate chemistry with each other that it is beautiful to watch. The one Draisaitl goal It's so easy for them. That's the thing, man. I've only been doing this show for 2 weeks, and every single time I turn the Oilers on my television or my iPad or my phone, wherever I am when I'm watching them, I see McDavid do stuff you shouldn't be able to do in real life. That the way he plays the puck is the way a puck hog plays the game in EA Sports' NHL franchise. You're not supposed to be able to bob and weave through professional hockey players like that. You're not supposed to be faster than everybody and better at hockey than everybody. Generally speaking, there's supposed to be a trade-off somewhere on that relationship between those two traits. And Connor just never got the memo. He is genuinely that good. The Oilers have done everything they can to facilitate keeping him happy. They brought in Chris Knobloch because of the relationship the two had dating back to Connor's time in Erie. I imagine Knobloch will get an extension. Draisaitl will get an extension. McDavid will get an extension. I believe he's eligible the year before the last year, so then they could add on after that last year expires, but I'm not up on my CBA rules, but I think this will keep the Vandals at the gates. To use a history parable to use a history parable to describe the Oilers and the hockey media. The hockey media is always ripe to pick at the bones of a team that is in disarray. You look at the change in tone and conversation about the Toronto Maple Leafs over the last 24 hours, and you tell me hockey media isn't borderline schizophrenic. 2 days ago, they were talking about Mitch Marner getting run out of Toronto with pitchforks and torches. The Leafs win a game, and then all of a sudden, it's all the pressures on the Bruins. If the Leafs have no pressure. Everyone expects them to lose. The Bruins, if they do this again and they lose their series and they go to Game 7 after being 3-1 2 years ago, it's all contrived nonsense. The Leafs are a good team. The Bruins have played better than them. Sometimes you're going to play a team that plays better than you, and you're going to get sent home. The hockey playoffs are not a moral failing. If you lose in the playoffs, you don't have to leave town like you just lost a match in 1993 WCW. There aren't loser leaves towns matches in the NHL. That doesn't happen. Sure, stakeholders get in trouble, and we can talk about that from a Kings perspective in the third segment as we talk about what's going to happen down the road coming up in round 2. Eddie Garcia of Locked On Kings had predicted that if the Kings bowed out of the series, and particularly in early fashion, that he could see both Rob Blake and Hiller, their interim coach, getting canned, and maybe some changes to the roster to reconfigure it. Because though it's talented, something very clearly didn't work here, especially in the way that it was envisioned. The Kings came out of the gate great. They were really good up until about Christmas. Then they hit a really rough midseason lull. They came back around end of February, mid-March, put together a nice stretch, finished third in the Pacific Division, but the Oilers have staved off the narrative game for at least one more round. And speaking of that next round, I think there's a real argument that even though the Canucks are going to have home ice, should they be able to beat Nashville and go to round 2, I think there's a real argument the Oilers are going to be the favorite in that series, and the expectation is going to be for the Oilers to at least make the conference finals, especially being that Thatcher Demko is most likely not going to come back, and you're going to be looking at Casey DeSmith or Arthur Silovs. All due respect to Arthur Silovs, but he's not Thatcher Demko. When Demko's on, one of the 5-10 best goalies in the world. If Silovs was that good, he would have been playing at some point for some team somewhere. But coming up next, we are going to tackle just that, the second round of the playoffs, whoever the opponent is, give you a little bit of flavor on both the Canucks and the Predators. We'll talk a little bit about the Kings' perspective about this, about maybe where they go from here, aside from coaching changes. And we'll talk a little bit more about this Oilers playoff run as it develops. Oilers fans, you got to be feeling pretty lucky right now, right? 5 games, no goalie concerns, best 2 players playing like it. We've got hockey playoffs, we got basketball playoffs, we got regular season baseball going. So the Jays had another nice game the other night. And if you want to get in on the action, press some of that luck. It's winner take all time over in the association and here in the National Hockey League. and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Thank you, everyone, for hanging out on this Friday. Oh, how I wish it was Friday. My body clock's been all out of whack. I went to Dollar Dog Night at Citi Field on Tuesday, and that in my brain, I was feeling that was Wednesday all day. I spent all day Wednesday thinking Wednesday was Thursday. On more than one occasion on Wednesday afternoon, I had sent a couple text messages trying to make plans for the next day, thinking Thursday was Friday, and had multiple people text me back, you want to do something on a Thursday, and then very quickly realized what day of the week it was. But thank you for hanging out on this Thursday whenever you are listening to the show, whether you're a morning commuter, you're at the gym in the afternoon, whenever you are listening, thank you. You people are why we do this. Content needs an audience, and without you, we don't have a show. So thank you very much for listening. And speaking of listening, I hope the Oilers are listening, because this is about to be the God's honest truth. The Oilers may never have an easier path to the conference final ever in this era of McDavid and Draisaitl. All due respect to the Kings, all due respect to the Canucks and the Predators. You go and watch the games in that Canucks Predator series, and I'm clicking over to my notes here because I have some stuff on goal differentials. But in that series, Vancouver, Nashville, we're going to play a game number 6 tonight, Thursday night, as you're listening to this episode. In that series, the two teams have scored 12 goals apiece. We are 5 games in, 24 total goals, 10 even at even strength, and 2 apiece on special teams. Very small margins over in that series. I think that's a battle of both resourcefulness and genuinely of will, because Nashville does not have the talent to play with Vancouver. We can be honest and account for that. I know Roman Josi is a Norris finalist again. I know Saros has been a Vezina Trophy guy a couple times. Forsberg, 48 goals this year. McDonough, Ryan O'Reilly, multiple cups. Gus Nyquist had a really nice season for them. Tommy Novak in particular was really good for them on their third line. Tommy Evangelista, I think is how you pronounce his name, is having a real nice season for them. I've liked what I've seen from their defense other than Josi, McDonough in particular. I've long had a soft spot for Ryan McDonough. I've felt he's always been underrated. Once he got to Tampa Bay, playing behind Sergachev and Hedman in the pecking order, he just didn't get the credit he deserved for his role on those teams as the shutdown guy. And you're never going to get as much credit for playing good defense as you will as playing good offense as a defenseman. But Brian McDonough is very underrated. And if we're going to go head to head, the Oilers, I'm saying, and when I say we, if they're going to go head to head with Nashville or Vancouver, there's a real argument Edmonton has more talent with them both. And I know what you're going to say about Vancouver. You're taking McDavid over Pettersson. That's not a conversation. You are taking Draisaitl over JT Miller. That is not a conversation. Zach Hyman, Brock Besser, that's a fun topic. That is a conversation we will definitely have if the Canucks advance and we have time to set up a preview episode. Brock Besser is one of my favorite players in the entire NHL. He's had a really strong season, first 40-goal season of his career this year. Quinn Hughes, Norris finalist, Norris favorite as NHL's best defenseman, really had the opportunity to shine in a way on a good team that's kind of requisite to getting consideration for the Norris. If you're on a bad team, unless you're Erik Karlsson and you just put up a ton of points, it's hard to win that award. But Evan Bouchard can do 80, 90% of what Quinn Hughes does. That's not a terrible change. Philip Roenick or Matthias Ekholm? I'm taking Ekholm. Then it starts to get interesting. You want Nuge? You want Niels Höglander? You want Evander Kane or Dakota Joshua? You want Ryan McLeod or Elias Lindholm? And most importantly, Elias Pettersson's having a rough series so far. He has not been great at 5-on-5. His underlying numbers are all pretty much under 50%. Excuse me here as I click over to another tab because, as you can tell by the way I talk, I have a lot of tabs open in my brain here, and I want to make sure I'm looking at the right numbers as I talk about this. Yeah, Elias Lindholm has 2 assists through these 5 games against Nashville. Edmonton, Vancouver would be very open-ended. There would be a lot of scoring chances, and it would be very volatile and dangerous hockey in the sense that when teams are going to compromise defense to create offense, it is always going to put more burden on the goaltenders, and goaltending is significantly more volatile than any other position in the sport. If you consistently pepper a goalie over an extended period of time, you are eventually going to break through. And on the chance Nashville is able to win Game 6 and Game 7 and advance to the second round, at that point, then you gotta show Nashville some respect. Talent-wise, it's not close. UC Saros would be the one major advantage Nashville would have. Saros is definitely more accomplished than Stuart Skinner, though you could argue Stuart Skinner had a better regular season this year than Saros did. Saros has been the most shot on goalie in the entire league, like 3 of the last 4 seasons. He gets better the more he's peppered, so that could be a real conundrum for the Oilers. But no matter what, looking at both of those teams, if you're the Oilers, if you're an Oilers fan, you got to feel pretty good about your chances. The Oilers made mincemeat of the Kings. They didn't even play that well. Like we highlighted in the opening segment, they're under 50% in all the metrics other than high danger. And that's mostly just because McDavid does ridiculous stuff and sets up other guys. They're not doing the hard work for their offense. And if you're playing Nashville, if you're playing Vancouver, are they going to be more disciplined than the Kings? There's not really a way to get a feel for that. You don't know how the games are going to be officiated. I know that'll be the prevailing talking point out of Game 5 in Edmonton, is that the officials gave the game to the Oilers because they called so many penalties. And were all of those penalties? No, I would have let some of those go if I was officiating the game. I probably wouldn't have called Fiala for embellishment there on the one trip. But the officiating is always bad. And I know that's a cop-out. That's not an excuse. That does not mitigate the advantage the Oilers got in this game. But being that the officiating is generally bad in the playoffs and in the league in general, complaining about the officiating in a series you did not score a single power play goal feels a bit moot. Could the Kings have won tonight with a little bit of a better effort and maybe one more bounce? Yeah, probably. But the Kings have won Game 4, 1-0. Yeah, the Kings definitely could have won that game. The Oilers did. I have long said this. I don't remember which of my coaches growing up said this, but luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. The Oilers were not great in this series, but they were prepared enough and they had enough opportunities to capitalize on. There definitely was a moment there in Game 4 where you're holding on to your butt and you're hoping you find the one goal in that kind of rock fight game where you avoid overtime. But the Oilers showed you more than enough to feel okay. I would honestly, and maybe I'm a hard grader, to quote the great Mike Francesa. I know as an Edmonton Oilers fan, you're probably not familiar with who Mike Francesa, the New York sports radio host, is, but he's a hard grader. He doesn't believe everybody should make the Hall of Fame, but the Oilers played B- hockey, B- C+ hockey the majority of this series and won handily. They're going to be favorites against Nashville or Vancouver and their third string goalie. They're going to get the benefit of the winner of Vegas, Dallas playing Colorado in round 2. So whoever comes out of that side of the bracket to play that would be who the Oilers play in the conference final. That is about a good opportunity as you are going to get in today's NHL. But that will just about do it for today's edition of Locked On Oilers. Make sure you are subscribed wherever you get your podcast. Please leave the show a 5-star review. Leave a nice comment if you want to leave a review on Apple Podcasts. If you are watching over on YouTube, the eye bags aren't terrible today. I actually got a decent amount of sleep last night, being that The Oilers didn't play. I got home from the Met game kind of early and I could sleep in a little bit. So all of that in conjunction, I kind of look like a functioning person. It's definitely a little bit late on the East Coast right now as I record this, but wouldn't have it any other way, man. Hit that subscribe button, hit the alarm bell, make sure you get an alert when the newest episode goes live. Been really consistent about getting these out for your morning commute, so that way you have the luxury of picking if you want to listen to it first thing in the morning, you want to listen to it on the way home, on the gym, or at the gym. I got you covered. I'll be back tomorrow. Until then, let's go Oilers.